What's the most bizarre coincidence you've ever experienced? My dad and his friend, who were both from Sweden, went on a holiday to Las Vegas in the 80s. After a night of partying, they decide to go to a random diner, and while standing in the parking lot they run into two Swedish girls who were also there on vacation. Maybe not that big of a coincidence, except the fact that my dad and that friend went to Vegas again exactly 10 years after, go to the same diner, and run into the same two women in the parking lot again. Was going to a trivia night with my roommate. I invited my friend from high school. He invited his college friend from all the way across the country. When they saw each other they went, "Oh, long time no see." They had met that morning off Facebook to tour an apartment and had just decided to become roommates. I was on a date with a girl once and we were driving in my car to wherever we were going. I was telling her a story about a friend of mine who recently gotten rear-ended right as we were stopping at a red light. While I was telling her the story, a car in the next lane went flying past and rear-ended a stopped car. As I was talking and saw it, I pointed to it and said it was just like that right there. Took a few seconds for it to sink in how strange of a coincidence it was. When I was in college, as a foreigner I got hit by a car and some dude was kind enough to get my stuff, call an ambulance. Helped me call my family. Due to the shock I couldn't remember him and I had to take a semester off, because I broke my hip into two parts. When I got back to school he was in the same class as me and he showed me my dad's contact with his name as proof. He and I became friends. I ended up in hospital following a car accident on my 18th birthday. Ended up sharing a room with a girl who was in a different car accident also on her 18th birthday. We ended up figuring out, or actually our mothers figured out, that we were both born in the same hospital at the same time, about 15 minutes apart. We're still good friends. I don't particularly believe in any of that star sign stuff, but it is super weird how similar the two of us are in personality and especially our sense of humor. Good friend in Grand Junction, Co. We tried dating, but were much better as friends. Couple years later, after I had moved away and lost touch, I was living in Alaska. Go to do a hot tub repair and lo and behold, it's her house. My brother used to buy these technology-related magazines called Digit for me every month. It had been almost a decade since he had done that, and one day I just randomly thought about that magazine and remembered that he used to buy them. Several hours later, on the same day, he visited our house and gave me a new edition of that magazine. He saw them in a shop and remembered how he used to buy them for me, so he got one. I once had a porcelain statue in my apartment. Then I had a grad student do a deep cleaning of my apartment. Fast forward, the statue is now missing from my apartment and it's turned up in their apartment. Pretty big coincidence if you ask me. Start chatting and drinking with a couple guys while on vacation in Tokyo, who also were visiting. A week later, we get to Kyoto, take the metro to our hotel, and as soon as we got out the station and onto the street, here they were again. This is kind of a funny one, but about 5 or 6 years ago my wife and I moved out of NYC and bought a house in the town we both grew up in. I was in a local CVS where a blind woman asked if I would help her find a couple of things, organize her money, then call a cab for her. I said sure, helped her shop, organized her money, then called her a cab. I felt bad leaving here, so I waited until the cab showed up and told the driver that she wanted to go to the post office. I got home and my wife asked me what took so long, so I told her about the blind woman. Later on we were at my parents' for a BBQ, and my wife told my mom she raised a good soon, then went on to explain about the blind woman. My mom said that was so funny because my dad helped a blind woman earlier in the day too. She got out of a cab and asked my dad if he minded helping her with the post office's doors. It turns out I put her in a cab in CVS, and about 2 miles down the road my dad helped her out. Lol. What are the odds? 20-25 years ago I was in an online chat room WBS.com and ended up chatting with a woman my age. As it turns out she lived in my city in the same building on my floor. At the 50-year anniversary of the end of WW11, an American veteran was retracing his steps where he had been stationed in Florence, Italy. I was working as an au pair for a lovely family and was idling my time at a cafe when he asked me for directions to Via Maggio. He seemed lost and we asked where he was headed. He was looking for Via dei Michelozzi. We narrowed E down and ultimately, I told him that I could guarantee that his old girlfriend did not still live at that apartment because I lived there myself. We were able to track down the woman who had rented the apartment during the war because the building was owned by the family I was working for. Everyone was very excited about all of this, and we ended up hosting that American veteran for dinner at THR apartment. Red Hot Chili Peppers concert in the late 90s. Californication tour. Chad Smith threw one of his sticks in the audience. Audience member threw it back to him and he caught it. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes I wouldn't believe it. High school quiz bowl. We got a bonus question about an English dude who went off to sea as a teenager and returned in his 20s to write a book about his travels. Had supposedly fought against the Spanish, turned pirate, then later fought for the Habsburgs in the Ottoman-Austrian War, fought in duels, been captured and sold as a slave, and then escaped. None of us had a clue, so we just stared at each other, and our captain answered Smith. The moderator said more specifically, please. Our captain kind of looked at us wildly and said, John? It was correct, because that's the same guy who went to Jamestown in Virginia later on, and was involved with the Powhatan tribe and Pocahontas. When I was in the early stages of dating my spouse, I brought her to my hometown to meet my parents. While looking at an old family photo album, she pointed to a picture and said, "How do you know this man?" I answered, "That's my uncle," and she said, "No, he's my uncle." Turns out her mother's sister married my mother's brother. I was in a natural history museum and saw a picture of the Thagomizer on a Stegosaurus skeleton. I was telling my friends about the history of it when I pulled up the Wikipedia article. The picture on the wiki article was the exact thing I was standing in front of, from the exact same angle. Meeting my former high school biology teacher 16 years later at the vet hospital I currently work at and have been part of the team for the past 1.5 years. Apparently she had been a client of this particular hospital back when I was still in high school. The vet hospital isn't even located in the same city as the high school she used to teach at, either. Even more bizarre is that another biology teacher from the same high school is also a client, and he was my sister's freshman bio teacher. I played one season of Pee Wee hockey with a dude, and then he stopped playing. 5 years later I ran into him at the San Diego Zoo. We both lived in Texas. My dad has mentioned on multiple occasions before that after I was born, the first song he heard on the radio was Turn 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 by the Byads. Flash forward nearly 30 years, he comes to pick me up to go out for dinner. We get in his car and switch on the radio, and guess what's playing? Really spooked by that one. In quite possibly the most embarrassing moment of my young life, when on holiday at a Butlins-type caravan park, I went looking for my mom in a crowded arcade to ask for more coins, thought I saw her, so ran up behind her and gave her a hug, only to find it was a complete stranger. My actual mom was watching from a nearby table and laughing her ass off at me. The imposter mom brought me over to the table and ended up chatting with my mom. Then my younger siblings turned up with 2 random kids in tow saying they'd made some new friends. Could we sit with them at the entertainment that night? It was that lady's kids. Both families ended up getting along really well, and we hung out most of the week, but didn't really keep in touch. 3 years later, we went to visit my auntie in Greece where she was living at the time, and on the beach one day someone came up behind me and gave me a surprise hug. Same family again. We ended up keeping in touch for several years after that.